cool thing about climate action is that you don't have to start something new from scratch. There are already people doing the work in your community, so find them and join in. Welcome to Sustainable in the Suburbs, a podcast for the eco-curious who want to live a greener life and are looking for a place to start. I'm your host, Sarah Robertson Barnes, a soccer mom with a station wagon and a passion for sustainable living. Each week, I'll bring you practical tips and honest conversations to help you waste less, save money, and make small, doable shifts that actually fit your real life. Because sustainable living doesn't have to be perfect to matter, and you don't have to do it all to make a difference. Hi, friends, and welcome back to Sustainable in the Suburbs, the podcast where we start where we are, use what we have, and live a little greener, one small shift at a time. Right now, it can feel like everything in the news is relentlessly negative. Some days it seems like collapse is inevitable in so many ways. And when you're carrying all that, it's so easy to feel angry or overwhelmed or worse, apathetic. Like, why even bother trying at all? But in times like these, when so much feels uncertain and there's so much at stake, we need more than action alone. We need to stay connected, to care for each other, to keep tending what matters in big ways and small. And when it comes to the climate crisis, that kind of steady, grounded care is more important than ever. So this week, we're talking about how to hold those climate emotions, how to keep tending in place. People and community can be a powerful way to keep going. I'm joined today by someone whose work reminds me that we don't have to hold any of this alone, and that connecting with nature and each other is critical climate action too. Jen Knoch is a Toronto-based sustainability advocate, book editor, gardener, and self-described lover of mason jars, someone deeply committed to climate action and living with care. Jen facilitates a powerful climate emotions retreat here in Southern Ontario, which is actually how we met. She's also someone I deeply admire for really living her values, from growing native plants and rescuing forgotten ones, to cycling the city, building up community food systems, and showing up for her neighbors in ways big and small. So let's get into it. Hi, Jen. I'm so happy to have you on the show today. I first connected with you on Instagram, but then in real life at your Climate Emotions Retreat, which is coming up again really soon, and I'm so excited to see you. And
we're so excited to have you back.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm going to talk about birds again this time, but...
Amazing.
Ever since then, I've leaned a lot more into processing my climate emotions, and that's been the focus of my reading and whatnot. But you've really also inspired me in the ways that you show up for your local community and this planet that we share in general. So I'm really excited to bring your voice and all your experiences to the podcast today.
Thank you, Sarah. I am so happy to be here.
So for folks who might not know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
So I'm a book editor by trade. That's what I do during the day. And that has actually some climate overlap. I did things like develop a carbon calculator for the whole Canadian publishing industry. I published some eco books. Our publisher is a B Corp, one of the only two publishers who are B Corp in Canada. Shout out to ECW Press. So I do some climate work as part of my regular job because, any job can be a climate job. And then you can find me on the internet. I have a Substack that is just mildly neglected because I kind of did a regimen and then I finished it, but I couldn't quite give it up. So it's called 5 Minutes for the Planet. And if you like stuff about actionable items that you can do to take control of some of this hellscape, that's what I got for you there. And then as you said, I'm on Instagram, can't kick that habit either. And there I'm usually posting about urban gardening, about climate, waste reduction, pioneer hobbies, food security, that kind of thing.
Pioneer hobbies?
Yeah, I got many. Yeah, if it peaks before World War I, I'm probably doing it.
Yeah, I call mine granny skills. So
that's nicer.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later. So I usually ask folks to tell me about their suburb because suburbs are not a monolith. But you do live in the city of Toronto. I also used to live in Toronto, so I know it's a collection of neighborhoods that are also very different. So can you tell us about the area that you live in and how that fits into your life in the city as a whole?
Yes, so I am originally from the suburbs. So I have the credentials of understanding the suburban experience profoundly. I grew up mostly in Burlington, but now I live in the Annex in Toronto, which is a very lovely, wonderful neighborhood to live in. I've lived here about 15 years. And so we have great transit access and walkability, but plenty of our own challenges, namely things like housing security. I'm a renter, which I mention partially because of some of the things we're going to talk about today that I think are still available to renters. And also just because hey, lots of us do that, and housing crisis, et cetera. So if you're a renter, I feel you, I see you. There are so many things around climate that aren't available to us, but there are many that still are.
Renting is often seen as not as good as being a homeowner and transient, and that's just simply not the case. So I'm very glad that you said that, and we're going to touch on all of that a little bit later. But first, as I mentioned earlier, I first connected with you when I was really struggling with processing all of my climate emotions, in all caps. Because while I often talk a lot on this show, at least, about love and joy and compassion and care, there's also plenty of frustration and grief. And if I'm being honest, there's a lot of rage in there too. But being engaged in all of that doesn't mean you have to stay stuck. We have to move through these things together. So can you tell us about the Climate Emotions Retreat? What inspired you to create it and what it's all about? What a day looks like at the Climate Emotions Retreat?
Yeah, I love the opportunity to talk about this. So part of the reason I did it is because having feelings about the climate crisis is somehow socially unacceptable. That caring about the future of this planet and all the beings on it is a real downer or a bummer or a buzzkill, and you should talk about celebrity gossip instead or something. And it can be really isolating to feel like you're the only one who's crying because an indigo bunting just hit the window, and this is a recent example for me. But so it's really this kind of unsanctioned grief is the term that psychologists use, which can apply to other things too, like pregnancy loss, for example, where society just doesn't really get it. And then you think you're all alone, which is, again, if we're using our psychological term, something called pluralistic ignorance, where you feel like you're the only one, but that's not true. That's actually not the way it is. So we know that we need to be resilient in the face of, everything that's happening now and everything that's to come. And you can't be resilient all by yourself. That's just not how it works, not in the face of this huge snarl of problems. Most people do have feelings about the climate crisis, I think, on a certain level. It's just some of us maybe feel it a little more keenly. And so often the feelings that we have, and I think I love that you express this range because they're all there. Everybody's at the party. And if we can't face them because they're maybe unacceptable even to ourselves, we live with all this unprocessed anxiety and ambivalence and repression, and that's not good for anyone. And that's not helping the problem. Because then if we're stuck in avoidance and denial, we can't do anything about it. And I recognize too that we think that climate action is driven by our rational self. This is again, in psychology, they talk about there's a rider on an elephant and you think the rider's in charge, but guess what? Not true. And so our little brains, they're trying their best, our little rational selves. But ultimately being in touch with how we feel allows us to take action that's in line, to honor those feelings, to process them, to not get mired down in all this repression, and to do things often. I also really love to say, to stress that, and this is Joanna Macy, really, that your tough feelings are not bad. They are not a problem. They're a sign that that you're alert and you're compassionate and that you care. Like they're showing you that you are still a human being alive in this world. And that's beautiful. So even our tough feelings are sometimes a sign of something good. So the retreat itself was partially inspired by the work of Margaret Klein Solomon, who is a psychologist and also a writer. She has a book called Facing the Climate Emergency, which is great. And also, by the way, published by an A+ Canadian publisher in terms of sustainability called New Society Publishers. They were the first B Corp. We were the second. So I do a lot of work with them because they're amazing. So a good indie to support if you're inclined. Anyway, so it was a lot influenced by her because she did, and she still offers this, an online program called Climate Awakening, where you can sign up at a time to connect with strangers from around the world. And she kind of has these prompts, and then everybody gets a little time to say their piece in response to those prompts. And I did one of these at one of those times when I felt so overwhelmed and so alone and just desperate. And even though the idea of essentially having a Zoom with strangers to talk about your darkest things is horrifying in prospect, and I'd rather do almost anything else, it seems, it was actually really therapeutic to have even that 1 hour where this could be a thing that we could connect over, where I didn't feel alone anymore, where I felt seen and heard, where you just saw there are other people who feel this. And so after I did that, I thought, well, that was good, but what if there was more? And I have some friends who have a piece of property just outside the city, and they've always offered it. They're activists, and they always offer it for activist purposes or art purposes or whatever. They're wonderful, generous, inspiring souls. And so I said to them, what if I did this? What if I did a day retreat? And they were all in. And so what we do on this day, which we do about twice a year in the summer and in the fall, we come together and we have facilitated conversation, facilitated by me. And we kind of have 3 big conversational sessions throughout the day, but we also do beautiful yoga, looking out over the fields and the blue sky. And we go for a silent walk in the woods, and we have opportunities to practice regulation of ourselves. So we do different meditation things, trying to give people more tools, but also just an opportunity to connect with like-minded people who also feel this deeply, to be inspired by them often, to be seen by them, to practice taking care of each other. And which isn't, we're used to caregiving within our family units, because that's socially sanctioned. But this kind of just generosity and care and looking out for strangers and being oh, I noticed you're squinting into the sun. Do you want to switch seats? Or oh, do you want to have some of this food, or let me pass you this, or whatever. So to me, it's this beautiful, unplugged, essentially work day length thing where we're able to be in nature, be with each other, and talk about the stuff that it feels like we can't talk about anywhere else.
It's fascinating how sometimes it's easier to do that with strangers.
Yeah, totally.
There aren't any of those barriers in place. You aren't performing your role, whether it's in your friend group or your family group or at work or whatever. It feels like there's even more permission to really authentically feel what you're feeling and really connect with that other person on a human level.
Absolutely. But okay, since we have this moment, tell me what it was like to be there and not be me.
It was really beautiful, precisely because everyone was there for not the same reason, but a similar reason, from a place of deep caring and seeking connection, and also a place of willingness, of willing to be vulnerable, willing to regulate, because we do live in such a culture of outrage and yelling and attention seeking. Feels that way sometimes. To intentionally be slow and quiet. The silent forest walk was really transformative in that way, because it's interesting to see how everybody abides by those rules of like, let's just be quiet and introspective, but be together. And I've really carried that with me ever since. And that's why I'm coming again.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice. Thank you. It's really great to hear that. I'm glad that was the experience, and, we'll continue to evolve and continue to be there as long as people want to come. And I should also say, like, this is a whole nonprofit endeavor. All of the money gets donated to Indigenous Climate Action. And this time we're having it on Indigenous Peoples Day. So that's nicely aligned.
Yeah, I noticed that. And I thought that was really special. And I know that we'll be talking about that. So I'm really looking forward to it this year. What would you say to someone who thinks that feeling it won't fix it?
I mean, you're going to feel it kind of regardless. I think it's like these are all, and the meditation teacher Sharon Salzberg likes to talk about emotions like guests in your home. And some of those guests are going to be noisier. Some of those guests are going to stay longer, but they're not you. They're not the home. They're just passing through, and eventually they'll leave. And I think that we sometimes think that ignoring it and suppressing it will make it go away. But if someone's screaming in the room next to you in your house, you're not going to be able just to chill and have a good time. So I recognize that it is so hard to feel these things. And I am not a person without anxiety, for example. And I do think it's not that we have to be dive into the deep end all the time. And one of the things that we're practicing on retreat is, going deep and then pulling back and recalibrating, and allowing ourselves to find some groundedness in our bodies and the world. So it's not an all or nothing that you have to just plummet yourself into the depths of despair on the regular, all the time. But I do think that reckoning with those emotions, these people who are guests in your home, and kind of at least being reasonably polite to them, allows them maybe to leave sooner or to become a different kind of guest, like the one that's not dominating the party all the time and is a little less unruly. I mean, ultimately, this is about getting familiar with these more difficult things we go through. And I do think that the things that we we know that doing hard things, like if we're weight training, we know that makes us stronger. Or you love cold plunging. God, that is tough. But you face it and you know that it didn't kill you. And that maybe the next time you can spend a little longer in the tub, or you can be with your rage a little and be a little bit more comfortable being with your rage rather than it just being totally subsumed by it, curtain of blood drops, kind of feelings, which yeah, I got those too.
It's so interesting that you're talking about plummeting and pulling back. And it makes me think of this book I read last year. I think I talked to you about it, Earth and Soul, by Leah Rampey. And she talks about ecosystems, life on the edge. So at the edge of a forest or the shoreline, a borderland between a grassland and scrub, that sort of thing, that she calls them edge zones. So these edge zones are where life is very precarious, but also where it is transforming the fastest. And we're very much in one of these edge zones right now in our life on the planet. And that can be either a place to fall or a place to fly. And both take courage. So,
for the permaculture people out there, I'm sure there's a few edge zones are really important in your permaculture design. That's a really rich ecosystem to investigate and consider.
So while we're talking about ecosystems, let's shift gears here a little bit because, of course, as we're recording this, and speaking of anger and frustration, it's impossible for us to not talk about what's going on in Ontario right now, which is bringing up a lot of climate emotions for many of us. So this past week, our Conservative provincial government passed something called Bill 5, which is being touted as an economic bill or like a red tape reduction bill. But in reality, what it does is strip away vital environmental protections and give more power to developers. So some of the highlights, lowlights, would be that it would repeal Ontario's Endangered Species Act. It would block access to renewable energy products or projects. It would sideline Indigenous rights and consultation and create what they're calling, quote, special economic zones where developers can simply ignore local and provincial laws. So it's an attack on ecosystems and communities that so many of us care about. And honestly, I'm just sort of left feeling like furious and heartbroken, but also more determined than ever to protect what we can. So how are you feeling?
Similar. It's devastating. It's a devastating setback. It's infuriating that this is democracy, that this is, and I think like, oh, special economic zone or cool. Like, what else is one of those? Like the tar sands. Like we don't need that. And also so many of these things are done like, supposedly for me, like me who can't own a home. And I'm like, hold on. No. This isn't what I asked for at all. I don't want this. And I think the good news is that people are going to fight hard in the face of this. And you already see some of the acts of resistance that are coming up around it. I mean, there are people in the legislature when it was passed protesting. There are people outside the legislature. And I know that groups like Eco Justice, et cetera, and grassroots groups, that there will be another thing to fight. What kills me about this government is that we need to be moving forward. We need to be doing more. We need more aggressive policy in terms of climate action. And instead, what we end up doing is fighting these rearguard battles to like save the Greenbelt from corruption, from actual corruption, and we spent how many years and how much resources like had to go into that fight. Just because, a certain group of greedy people feel that economic good is the only good that matters.
We live in a society, not an economy.
Not an economy.
Yeah. And once we pave over the Greenbelt, like toast can never be bread again.
No. And it's like totally overlooking the ecosystem services, if we're going to speak in economic language, like that Greenbelt provides. Like, oh, enjoy the mass flooding, enjoy, or in this case, enjoy the poisoned water from your ring of fire mining or whatever the case may be. It's incompatible with a just and healthy society. And it is fundamentally devastating to see that this is something that the majority of our elected officials think is a good idea.
Yeah. And I'm just nodding along to elected officials because, did not vote, would have won the last election, which is also very frustrating because it feels like, and this is again is why it's so important to connect with other people, because you feel like you're the only person that knows about it, that cares about it, that's fighting against it. And there is such power in our collective action. So like what can people do, like either practically or emotionally right now when these policies feel like the gut punch that they really are?
Practically, the best thing is to contact your elected official, your MPP. Let them know that you fundamentally disagree with this. Call, write, sign those online petitions from Environmental Defense and all these other groups like Ontario Nature. There's tons of groups putting together petitions. You can donate money to the nonprofits that do things like I am thrilled to see, to support eco-justice and have them in the courts challenging Doug Ford wanting to rip out our bike lanes that he just installed 1 year ago, which is really like my red rage comes in hard on that one. But that's what an amazing use of my money that both Eco-Justice and Cycle Toronto, who's a great collective advocacy group in Toronto for the rights of cyclists, to see them in court, like making progress. Oh, that's like such a relief. So I know like the economy, like we're talking about this because it's not great out there. But if you do have money to spend or time to give, collective action can do that. There are going to be plenty of opportunities to stand outside Queen's Park and yell a bit with a sign. And that can feel really good. When not many people show up, it feels pretty bad. Then I have to give myself a big pluralistic ignorance kind of like lecture, being like, just because people aren't here doesn't mean they don't care. Don't cry in front of Queen's Park again. Which I wish was not such a recurring thing that's happened to me. But yeah, that's another thing you can do. And then, emotionally, finding people that you can talk to about it, like-minded people is great, especially if those like-minded people will go to the protests with you, for example. And also big fan of A Stupid Little Walk. You and I are both devotees of the mental health walk. I do one pretty much every day. And this is a beautiful time of year. The peonies are popping any day now. By the time this comes out, maybe we're off, but like there is always something beautiful happening in nature and just like moving your body in a gentle rhythm on a day when the air isn't actively harming you like today. So that's a bit of a setback on the old mental health regime on multiple fronts.
It's very smoky right now due to wildfires.
We are at worst air quality, like the 11 plus, which I think, okay, why did we make a scale that goes beyond 10? I don't know, but it goes to 11. Yeah, it goes to 11 plus, which like speaks to the moment, I guess, where like 10 can't cut it for how bad things are. Yeah. we need the F minus of air quality. So take care of yourself. Do whatever regulating activities are your jam, figuring out what those are and like dispensing them liberally. There are lots of days I'm sure you too, don't want to go on that stupid little walk. But I almost always feel at least a bit better.
There's birds out there. Yeah.
There are birds out there and migration, is happening. So they're cool birds, like not your average house sparrows.
But all of these things that you've just mentioned we have three options, right? We have like fight, flight, or freeze. So sometimes you just have to freeze and take care of yourself, but take all of this and turn it into fight. And there are so many amazing organizations that already have structures and procedures and everything in place that you can join. Don't think like you have to start something or whatever. There are folks out there who are doing the work. Find them. And even if you have $5 to throw them, like that can go a long way. Yeah, it can fund a court case or an ad, like the campaigners, whatever it is, like all of it matters and all of it moves the needle. So all of these will be in the show notes for you because Jen's been so generous in mentioning like 25 things so far. And I'm going to make sure that they are all linked in the show notes because there is something for everybody to latch onto. So You mentioned the peonies. I have yet to successfully grow a peony. I've given up on that.
This is my first year of like having one bloom. So there might be hope. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
My lilac bushes finally bloomed for the first time in the 11 years since I planted them. So I think this says something. So you mentioned earlier that you live in the city and you live in a rental, but you still grow things. So why does that matter so much to you? If it's, quote, just a rental. Because I've heard that before too. So.
So I was really fortunate to come into, so first of all, I have a big old backyard. It's pretty large. It's a shared house. And then we have a big backyard, a big long backyard. And when my best friend actually lived downstairs in this house before I moved in upstairs, with ideal friends type arrangement. Really can't do better than that, I tell you. And she started gardening here because there already was kind of an established garden. Our next door neighbors were an Italian family, where there's a long gardening tradition. And Vito Sr. started the garden here. He cut the lawn in exchange for growing tomatoes in our yard because it was sunnier. And so bless Vito. So he had started this bed, and then my friend moved in and he was slowing down and she took it over. And although he would still like hang over the fence occasionally and like provide feedback, like in a gentle way, your seeds are too close. You don't put two babies in one cradle, gems. And so she and I started gardening there together, and then I moved in here. Now it's about a 650 square foot garden. So it's like roughly the size of my apartment is also the size of my garden, which shows you a lot about my priorities. Maybe I'd also rather do the chores out there than in here. And it's about 50% food, and then maybe about 40% cut flowers because I developed a real love of cut flowers and flower arranging. And cut flowers are very expensive, but not that hard to grow, a lot of them. And then there's like a lot of plants for pollinators. And then there's like maybe 10% is just pollinator plants and a few ornamentals. The front yard, the front lawn I wouldn't really call it a lawn at all, is now all pollinator plants, which is cool. So I've just devoted that space, like that's for them. And every year more of the scrubby turf gets turned habitat for our local pollinators. So I've been growing there for about 15 years, and it is one of my great joys in life. I wish that everybody loved gardening, and I know that there are some people that they're like, I tried it, it's not for me. I'm just like, but I just want to try again.
That's okay. We still love you.
I'm sure like people feel that way about other things, but I love gardening as a practice of care, because really it's about like observing the plants, trying to address their needs. It's a good practice of failure, which is a necessary corrective to me, eldest daughter, and elder millennial. Yes. So that's an important practice for me. And
even just practicing resilience.
Totally practicing resilience. I think that watching a seed grow is the most miraculous thing in the world. You start with one seed and then you could end up with thousands. Like the sheer abundance and generosity of nature, and which one absolutely must go read Robin Wall Kimmerer if that appeals to you, because she is the high priestess of that. She says all flourishing is mutual. And in the garden is the perfect illustration of that when you see how it functions as an ecosystem.
I constantly have Braiding Sweetgrass on my audiobook platform. I always have it on there, and I listen to a chapter on my stupid mental health walks. If you haven't read it yet, I do recommend the audio because her voice is utterly transformative when she's telling her own story. Liquid Sunshine. And her chapter on gardening and motherhood and moving into being a grandmother just takes me to my knees every time. It's truly beautiful. So I highly recommend even if you've read the book, listen to the audio as well and really let it get into your soul.
Agree. And if that book is too, maybe you're really pressed for time and you don't want, reading isn't your thing. Her new book, The Serviceberry, is very, very short and condenses so many of the key ideas in her work, especially around community and generosity and abundance. And it would take you, I don't know, an hour to read. And you can also listen to her audio of that either on an audiobook platform, I'm sure, or if that's not your jam, the essay that the book was originally published in Emergence magazine, and they have the audio on their feed. And so you can listen to her read it. And honestly, I feel like that's like a vaccine that I need to get regularly. Like, just give me the booster, give me the update. And I guess like that is one of my practices too, is like turning to the wise ones. And that's Robin Wall Kimmerer, that's Rebecca Solnit, that's these other writers and thinkers who help me realign my worldview. Yeah. So
it's very grounding. It's very simple, but it's very rooting, I suppose. It's not even grounding. It's very rooting. I just feel very held by those words. And sometimes that's what you need to be able to regulate so that you can move forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And which is gardening too.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally like you're helping with the rooting, and it is a rooting thing.
It's really well illustrated, I think, too, by there's a building being torn down across from you or in your neighborhood. And I've just sort of been watching your documentation of this happening, but you did a little plant rescue from the tear down.
I did a plant rescue.
Yeah, tell us about that. That felt so symbolic to me. So
we'll call it a rescue. Like, I the little line of permissions is maybe a bit tenuous, but it's fine. It worked out. There was a house not that far away that was being demoed, or it was slated for demolition. They had like the signs up to be like, this is going to be, I don't know, this many units or whatever, which actually great. I'm like all about mid-density housing, which is what they're putting in there. No opposition to this project for what it's worth. There was opposition though. It just not for me. Anyway,
we'll talk about NIMBYism another time. But yes.
Yeah. Plenty. And there was this big, it was because it was an older house. There's like this huge front lot because we didn't make our houses take up like the entire lot that they sit on once upon a time. And there was, and it had obviously been a garden that was very well tended once and had started to go a little bit wild because I'm sure the people who lived there were aging. And there was this beautiful rose bush that I used to admire on my mental health walks. If you ask me for a mental map of where certain plants are in the neighborhood, I can tell you. I got it. I would always stop and admire it. And then I found out that the house was slated for demo. And I was talking to another friend in the neighborhood. And I was just like, these rose bushes that are like probably decades old, some of them are going to get plowed under. Like, we should get them. And my friend Tess put a note in the mailbox and actually connected, not with the owners, but with people who did a really cool art project in the house before it was demo. So they brought in a whole bunch of graffiti artists and they all did different rooms and they painted it and turned it into a work of art that lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks. You could go and visit it and walk through all the rooms. And so that was very cool. And we went in one day and we dug out the rose bushes and other plants that we thought we could save. And like huge root systems, huge, a hole so big I could sit in it, in the one that I took. And I was worried about it. I was like, this has been here a very long time. We've done our best, but this is a tough transition. And I brought it to my yard and it kind of, it did not thrive in its first. And also, like, we had to do it then. It wasn't like, sometimes when you're moving plants, you wait for the optimal time. That wasn't an option. We did it on this blisteringly hot day in like July. Not a great time to move a rose bush. Anyway, it didn't thrive. But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to give up. Let's just see what happens through the winter. And then maybe it just goes in the trash and we did our best. Because gardeners kill plants too all the time. Don't let that be a thing. And I am so happy to say that she rooted, put on all this new growth, and maybe, I'm really hoping she is, maybe the first rose to bloom in my garden this year. Like we're days away. And to me, this symbol just kills me every time because like, things can be really bleak. Like, see winter. And nature reminds us that it's not final, like that the story continues. And that nature is incredibly resilient. And that with the right care, she can thrive. And so, yeah, I'm really honored actually to have this heirloom now in my garden and a little piece of the neighborhood that now that house is just like it's just a pit. Like I also went and took a bunch of spring bulbs this spring. And then like the next day it was like the wrecking ball. It wasn't actually wrecking, whatever. It came in and like, I was truly like, whew, just in the nick of time. Those daffodils got a relocation.
We talk about heirlooms as objects, right, that are sort of passed down through families. But this is such an amazing neighborly transfer of like a wealth of knowledge and love and beauty. And I'm not almost crying. It's fine.
I have several heirloom plants in my yard, actually, and they're labeled like with where they came from and whose they were, and then I know. And every spring, I see Uncle Dave's violets, or like Marv's hostas, and I'm reminded of them. And if that was the only way that someone remembered me, that'd be okay.
Yeah, I have some periwinkle that I took from my nan's house. Ooh, I'm all in my emotions right now. And I know it's invasive and it's just going to spread everywhere. And, but I see those little purple blooms in the spring and I think of her. And that's something you can never buy.
No. When on the day of my grandfather's funeral, I planted my first rose bush, actually. I bought one because he grew roses when I was growing up, and when we moved them out of their house, I couldn't rescue I regret it, but I couldn't rescue any of the roses. And so I bought one and I planted it on the day of his funeral. And, I've never been to his grave. Like that doesn't hold anything for me. But I spend several months a year with this rose that I planted in his memory. And that's better to me.
Just going through the range of emotions today, but I think that is a huge part of it, is you just have to let yourself feel it and understand that there's beauty in grief as well.
Grief is an indication of love. There's no grief without love.
Yeah.
And there are lots of times we would like to do without our grief, because it feels like a really heavy price to pay sometimes in the moment. But yeah, I try to always remind myself, like, the greater the grief, often the greater the love.
The spirit that you have of tending and care also really shows up in how you show up for the folks in your community as well. So let's talk about the energy that you put into mutual aid as part of climate action. So I'm seeing you do work with your food co-op and stocking the little free pantry and seed swaps and going to the native plant church sale and all of these beautiful ways that you engage in community care. So where did that start for you?
That's a good question. I don't know where exactly it started. Probably early pandemic time, or maybe a bit before, that someone planted a seed in me about mutual aid. I think that was a time when a lot of us learned a lot more about it. And I just feel like maybe we should take a moment to say like even what mutual aid is, because I think sometimes we kind of have this foggy idea about it, but basically mutual aid starts from a place of people deserve. People deserve food. People deserve a safe place to live. Things like this. People deserve healthcare. So many good things that people deserve. And so mutual aid is really a non-hierarchical way of organizing that is people showing up for each other in the ways that they are best able. And so there are all kinds of mutual aid groups out there. They could be around prison reform. They can be around food justice. They can be around all kinds of like abortion access, all kinds of great, worthy mutual aid organizations. The one that I'm most involved with in Toronto in a kind of more formal capacity is Community for Just Toronto, which you might guess is helping share food in our community. We have several fridge locations around the city, fridge and pantry, so things can be refrigerated and so fresh food can be shared. We set up at a lot of the farmers markets in the summer and bring a lot of beautiful farm fresh food to those fridges. But really, and also we do food rescue. So a couple times a week, I'll take food from the co-op that, isn't bad, but is past the point that they can sell. And so it's like milk that expires, milk with the best before of tomorrow or something. And bring that. And which I should say, like even in a small grocery co-op who's incredibly attentive to not producing waste, unlike some of our big grocery chains, I still can bring a garbage bag full of food twice a week because bread, for example, is a big thing. We actually see a lot of bread in the pantries because bakeries, like when it's a day old, they don't want to sell it anymore.
There's so much abundance.
Fresh stuff. There is so much abundance. And so that's one organization that I am involved with, I guess, kind of like a more formal organization. But I also think that there are so many amazing ways that you can do community care or mutual aid or whatever you may call it without that. So, for example, I am a member at our local grocery co-op. Shout out to Karma Co-op, which has been around in this city for 50 years. It was founded in part by the great Jane Jacobs, who lived on my street, incidentally. That's my celebrity brag. So at the co-op, there is obviously there's a lot of like-minded people who care about sustainability, who like things like gardening, who like things about food. And we didn't have a seed library there. And, as we say, like seeds are such a tremendous source of abundance. If you let one bean dry inside are like seeds for 6 more beans, for example, which can then make, I don't know, depending on the kind of bean, like 10 to 50 more beans.
I just planted the last of the Blue Lake beans that you gave me at the last Climate Emotions Retreat. So,
oh my gosh, I'm having a little moment about that. Yeah. Heirlooms, see, that's like, that's an annual, but it's still an heirloom.
And I think of you,
and you could save those
when
seeds.
I pick them, like, oh, these are the beans from Jen, and I'm gonna have them in my salad. And maybe it's like 6 beans, but it's a way that we are connected and that we have shared. And when that ripples out across how many seeds, how many seed libraries, how many gardens, how many neighborhoods,
right?
Yeah.
So like seeds are our teachers in so many ways. But so I just said, hey, we could have a seed library. And the manager said, okay, if you want to make it. And so I did. And I do things there too, like teach workshops periodically so that I can share skills around, say, like native pollinator plants or growing seedlings for food or winter sowing. And a cool thing is that at one of those workshops, one of the participants came up and said, there's opportunity for these climate action grants. And like, I really think there's something to do around this kind of like food growing in our community. And can I talk to you more about this grant? Are you interested? And so Andrew and I worked with a couple other people on putting forward a grant, and we got it. And now we have a community garden education program called Toronto Common Harvest, where we teach people. We were able to like buy actual materials, give them to people, teach them some things, and then encourage them to grow and to share what they grow at the community fridges or just in their community. And so that's like kind of a neat illustration of kind of like one thing leading to another. I was thinking a little bit the other day about how like community building is a real intangible thing, and it's kind of sounds like networking. And I remember being like a young professional, and the very idea of networking giving me the ick, and it still does if I'm honest. But I think that's because I didn't understand really what it was. I thought it was like you had to go to a party and walk up to a scary person and like basically cold call them like in person, which is a terrible strategy. Also, don't do that.
It's a different kind of networking though. It's like a mycelium network
Jen.
Instead of a LinkedIn network where we're not trying to get something from you. We're trying to share something from you.
We're trying to share, and we're working with the relationships we have, and like those relationships branch out over time, and you get to know more people, and now people say to me like, "Oh, I know you do a plant swap every year. Like, can you do a plant swap at the clothing swap?" And I'm like, "Heck yes, I can," because I already attend the clothing swap and I love it. It's amazing. So like, let's share plants there. So a lot of that has been organic, and it's been real. So once you kind of get that momentum going, you start knowing more people and building relationships. You can do more things together. There are more opportunities to come together and rescue a rose bush, or start a seed library, or create a whole garden program, or whatever it might be. And these are things I should stress that like give me great joy. Ultimately, like, yeah, sometimes there's some administration or some whatnot that you don't want to do, something around emails. But the actual human part where you can like hand someone a packet of seeds and be like, here, take this. Let me tell you about how good they are and why, and like how you can grow them, or like give someone a new skill. Is so wonderful. In our common harvest, our first meeting, it's like a room of like 25 strangers, and everybody has something to talk about because they're all there for gardening, and they're all excited. And the age range was like 9 to like 74 probably. And I just felt like, what a wonderful space to be in. And I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't know these people. And now I walk down, because it's based in our neighborhood, I can walk down the street and see people and say like, hey, how's it going? Like, what's happening with your garden? I think like you could get into it and be like, well, I really should do some mutual aid. I think that's the right thing to do. I think that's what a good person does. And okay, if that motivates you, cool, do it. Like I said, eldest daughter, elder millennial. I get it.
Yeah, come for the should and stay for the joy.
Stay for the joy. Stay for like the real moments of connection. There are some days where going and putting a whole bunch of beautiful food in the community fridge feels more fulfilling than whatever I did on Zoom that day. And I feel like, wow, this food is going to be in the bellies of someone who needed it hours from now. And if this weren't here, it wouldn't be. And like, man, that is a tangible thing. And so much of our lives has become weirdly intangible. And so a lot of these like community connections can be restorative in that way.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I speak with folks on the trails that I see, like when I do my bird box monitoring, for example, like that's a very solo activity. I'm part of a group. I accidentally joined this bird watching group, as one does. And we come together and we have like pub nights or whatever. And that's all fine and good. But where it really feeds my soul is inevitably someone asks what I'm doing. Another person in the neighborhood is walking by and asks what I'm doing. And I tell them, and they said, oh, I walk by these all the time. I had no idea what this was. How can I get involved? And I've recruited 3 people over the course of the last little while just to come along with me. I've taken a forest school group out with me, and you just never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to run into, who's going to be inspired, who's going to change your life. It's a spider web of
possibility.
Of opportunity, of possibility, of this is where we actually move the needle. Like, we can bitch on social media all we want, and like, I do that too.
Sure.
And there's definitely a place for that. But what it really comes down to is doing the work, and doing the work doesn't mean that it has to be difficult. And it doesn't have to be guilt driven or shame driven, because I don't believe that those are learning tools. It's finding what lights you up and doing that.
Exactly. And I think also sometimes it's like there's some bad advice out there that's like, well, whatever skills you have, bring those to the group or whatever. And like, honestly, yeah, I could. I'm a good copy editor, but like, do I want to, like, I don't know, sit at my computer copy editing 100 pages for Greenpeace after I clock out for the day? Like, not really. So for me, it's also been useful to do things that are a change of the channel, that like move me into a different physical space. And a lot of these community things are like creating little temporary third spaces, which I think is really cool. I mean, there's lots of grumbling about a lack of third spaces in our world, which I think is more or less true. But you can also create them. A wonderful thing about gardens, and I think all natural spaces, and this is part of why we do the retreat outside, is that like people are just more comfortable. Like, I think generally it can kind of put us more at ease. And I've had conversations again with these like near strangers in my program who come to my yard to pick stuff up. And like, the conversations have gotten deep real fast. Like, real fast. And I'm like, we're essentially strangers. And now you're telling me about like your history of mental health problems and your like LSD use therapeutically, or we're talking about caring, like palliative care for a pet, and like, like just like stuff where I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have expected. That's certainly not happening at the supermarket, and and it's not happening in a lot of our spaces. But there is something about the space, I think, and also, as you say, kind of like getting to know new people, like not feeling like you have to adhere to certain boundaries of the self, that maybe allows us to reach across in different ways.
I think we just feel more human outside.
I do.
Yeah, we feel more human, and then we are able to feel as humans. There's just more depth of feeling, or I don't know if it's because we're more vulnerable, like physically in our brains. Like, you're more vulnerable as a mammal outside, or what have you, but we're more vulnerable, but we're more comfortable. And so a lot of all these other barriers, your role, your job, your income, all of these, they all just fall away. Nobody cares what you're wearing when you are sitting on the grass in a field talking about your emotions.
It's so true.
There's a lot of power.
I hope you're wearing comfortable pants, like
this is a waistband-free zone.
That's right. We're going to make our discomfort emotional, not physical at this retreat.
But perfect. I think just these small acts of connection and care really do matter, and doesn't have to be a huge, sweeping, gets national attention thing. It can be as simple as sharing a packet of seeds. So that brings me to my favorite part of the show. It's a little segment. I call it One Small Shift, because this show is at its core going to be about making sustainability feel doable. Huge concepts are important to break down and understand and talk about, but then we all are left with the question of like, well, what do I do? What can I actually do? So what's one small thing that folks can take away from this episode, a small shift that they can make, whether it's a tiny habit or a mindset shift that will help somebody who's maybe feeling overwhelmed? What's one baby step they could take today?
This is actually so hard to choose, because I actually feel like there are so many small sustainable actions that give me big joy. And I also think that that's important, because that's how we refuel ourselves. But anyway, you know that. Okay, but I did choose, and mine is to go for a bike ride this week. If you don't have a bike, you can probably borrow one. There are like great bike shares in a lot of places. Just go on a little trip, do an errand, do something. Bikes are miracles of engineering. You can go so much farther. You can carry heavy loads. One of the top decisions of my adult life was becoming an urban cyclist, which is to say, just learning how to do it and be courageous enough to do it. Truly, like if I think of like the things that I've done in the last decade, that's one of the top ones, because it has given me so much joy and freedom and allowed me to connect with my neighborhood and my city in a way that I couldn't otherwise. My bike, on the crossbar, it says, "Through this ride, freedom." And I think that bikes are the ultimate expression of freedom. Really, they make you more porous too, like more alive to the world. Like so much of this stuff about the climate crisis is because we're traveling in our little bubbles, like insulated from the effects of it. And if you're out on your bike, you feel the heat and the rain and like the plants, you like the petals fall off the flowers of the trees on you. And I think it is actually like a divine sensation to ride with bare arms in like a warm weather and just like feel that gentle breeze on your skin. It's like biking can be like flying. And also it's, I firmly believe one of the ways we need to get around our cities in order to make them more sustainable, make traffic better, increase air quality, all of these things, bikes are the solution to. And if you're scared, I was scared. I was absolutely scared. And by, riding with a buddy and taking back streets and going slowly, eventually I used to like ride across like an hour across the city to go to work. And that was great. So get out there.
Let's go ride bikes. As the
Let's
kids would
go
say.
ride bikes.
We used to jump on our bikes and throw them down on somebody's front lawn in the burbs, and that's how you knew where everybody was. Let's go ride bikes.
Exactly. And like, and I feel most like a kid when I'm riding a bike again, often, because sometimes you're just like, wee, keep your wits about you. Don't go Meg Ryan City of Angels. That doesn't go well. But it is so joyful. I love packing my bike full of heavy stuff. Like I do this food rescue. It's always full of plants in the summer. I'm taking plants around. And I just feel like I'm winning. I do all my groceries on my bike. I don't have a car. And it can be really heavy, but it's not. It's not on my bike. Anyway.
What a feeling of power.
And it is so empowering, truly. And cheap and efficient and sustainable. And like I said, just joyful. It's, that's the best.
Thank you so much for being here, Jen.
It was so fun to cry with you on the internet.
Yeah. Before we go, where can people find you and learn more about the Climate Emotions Retreat?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So the Climate Emotions Retreat is usually on Eventbrite, but I always post about it on my Substack, which is called 5 Minutes from the Planet. And I post about it on my Instagram, which my handle is JKNoch, KNOCH. It's tricky. And we also there's a link there to a mailing list if you are interested in this kind of thing, but this probably won't come out before this retreat, I'm sure. But in the fall, if you want to find out when we're doing it, that means you'll be the first to know.
And we hope to see you there.
We do.
Jen, thank you again so much for sharing your perspective and your heart with us today. I think folks are going to walk away from this conversation feeling not just seen, but reminded that we can keep going if we stay connected to each other and tending the places that we love and building care into our communities. So thank you.
That was so good. I'm so glad.
Jen, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your heart today. I think a lot of people are going to walk away from this conversation feeling not just seen, but reminded that we can keep going by staying connected to each other, tending to the places that we love, and building care into our communities. If you enjoyed this conversation today, I'd love for you to stick around, subscribe, and tell all your friends. I also share weekly-ish sustainable living tips and updates through my newsletter. You can sign up for that anytime at sustainableinthesuburbs.com or just check the link down in the show notes. You can also find me on Instagram at Sarah Robertson Barnes, and I always love hearing what's resonating with you or how you're building care into your own life. Until next time, start where you are, use what you have, and live a little greener. Thanks for tuning in to Sustainable in the Suburbs. Every small step adds up, and I'm so glad we're doing this together. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me at sustainableinthesuburbs.com or at Sarah Robertson Barnes on all the things. Until next time, start where you are, use what you have, and live a little greener.